My name is Linden Tiffel, and I am the convener of this community. So Women in RMEL stands for Women in Research, Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning. And we are focused on accelerating the careers of women in the research, monitoring, evaluation, and learning space. You're all welcome once again. So I will take us through the agenda. So Alexandra, if you could just give me a minute.
Shall I
just share?
Okay, I'll stop sharing.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so while I'm pulling up the agenda, please can we all do our intros in the chats? Let us know where you're from, your name, what you currently do professionally, and also what you expect out of our session today. Okay, so my screen is coming. Please confirm if you can see my screen. Great. Okay, so we are on the first item. So basically, we are introducing ourselves, and then I'll just take us through just brief icebreakers, and then I will introduce our speaker, and then she'll take us through what she has for us. I'm sure we're all looking forward to hear what she has to share about Impact Mapper, and then we'll have a session for Q&A, some announcements, and then we'll end our session for today. Okay, so moving into the icebreakers. So the first thing I would like us to do is to think in a futuristic way. So I would like a few thoughts, or at least people to share in the chat. What do you want to see, or what do you want the world to look like in the year 2040? I'm sure probably some of us haven't really thought about it. We also didn't think 2030 was going to be this close. We're just 6 years away from 2030. So we have to start planning ahead, thinking ahead. What do we want to see happen by the year 2040? Would be glad to have some thoughts. Okay, I see a few intros in the chat. You're all welcome. Thank you, Tami. Thank you. So Kanathan, thank you all for your intros. Nice to see that you're all here. Okay, so any thoughts? What do you want the world to look like in the year 2040? If you also want to unmute and share it, you can also raise your hand and I will invite you to share with us. Okay, we have some intros coming in. Okay, please go for it. Is that Tami?
I'll take it. Yeah, it's
Okay.
Tami or
Yes,
Norma, yeah, whatever. I think the world of 2040 needs to be a world that's a lot more balanced. Specifically balanced for me, balanced in terms of mindset. So I'm imagining people with different cultures, and so on, but being able to, when communicating, when talking, they're able to, in a way, hone into a single picture without the need to keep translating and so on, because I believe that, yeah, I'm very pedantic with word usage. So if we can get to a point where I can speak my language, you speak your language, but we're able to still see one picture, that would do it for me.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much, Tami, for sharing. Okay, I see Jennifer's hand up. Jennifer, please, you can unmute and share your thoughts as well.
Thanks. Hi, Linda.
Hi.
Sandra. Glad to join you. I'm hoping that by 2040, we will stop having this extractive means of working. Capitalism, agriculture, fishing, you name it. It's all about extraction. And so I'm hoping for a regenerative way of working and being, where we give as much as we take in this world. And yeah. So, thank
Sure.
you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for sharing your thoughts as well. Okay. So please keep them coming for those who haven't shared, or you can just think about it, and yeah, hopefully we would have more of these discussions on our calls. Okay, so next thing is that I would like to know how many on this platform have used a similar tool for showing or telling impact of your projects. So we're going to look at Impact Mapper today. I don't know how many of you, out of curiosity, decided to read a little bit about it, but if you have a tool that you're currently using or have used before that enables you to show or tell the impact or impacts of your projects, it will be great to just have a sense in terms of familiarity with these kinds of tools or platforms. Or you could also share what you're looking to gain out of this session today. So anyone wants to share? What has your experience been? What tools do you use in helping you to tell or show impacts of your projects? Okay, anyone wants to share? Maybe I'll add one more question. How many of us have not heard of Impact Mapper before? I mean, before now. Okay, so Jennifer said she's never used Impact Mapper, but she's used tools for outcome harvesting. Okay, great. Thank you so much for sharing, Jennifer. All right, so we can think through, we can share as we go along, but for the sake of time, I would like to dive into the next segment, which is to introduce our speaker, and then she will take the stage. Okay, so Alexandra Pittman works at the intersection of impact tech, storytelling, wellness, and social justice. Entrepreneur Magazine has named her an innovative tech founder focused on sustainability. As the founder and CEO of Impact Mapper, she and her team have developed a software tool and consultancy firm empowering donors, nonprofits, corporates, and impact investors to track, visualize, and optimize their social impact funding and activities. Over the past 19 years, Alexandra has cultivated partnerships and advised global influencers and change makers, including teams at UNDP, UN Women, IKEA, Channel Foundation, Meta, Malala Fund, Oxfam, Fund for Global Human Rights, Porticus, Winthrop, Rockefeller Fund, to name a few. Her strategic guidance has helped organizations crystallize their values, articulate their goals, and effectively track and communicate their impact stories. Supporting her career trajectory, Alexandra earned a PhD in sociology and cultural psychology from Boston College in 2009, and then held a senior research fellowship at Harvard University. Her expertise spans diverse areas, including monitoring, evaluation and learning, impact management, participatory methodology, storytelling, gender equity, social justice, tech for good, philanthropy and impact investing, social enterprise creation, and responsible AI. Great. Wow, you're so versatile, Alexandra. We're so pleased to have you. So please, let's welcome her with a virtual clap. Alexandra, the stage is yours. Thank you for making time to be with us today.
Thank you so much, Linda. I really appreciate it, and really happy to be here with you all today and talking about something that I am very passionate about, and I'm sure you all are as well, being experts in this field of monitoring, evaluation, and learning. And that's the focus on the importance of stories. and storytelling in this field, and how we actually engage in analysis of these stories in systematic ways so that we can gain more information from them, and also other qualitative data that we're sitting on. And just to give you a bit more background on, you heard my bio, but I ran my own consulting company for about 10 years, working at this kind of intersection and working with many donors and small grassroots organizations, and other sort of entities. And so I ended up working across a lot of different types of actors in the philanthropic and nonprofit sector. And one of the things that was really apparent when I was doing this work, because I was helping organizations to set up monitoring and evaluation and learning strategies, really understand their work in more depth, was just the vast amount of text data that all these organizations were sitting on. And it didn't matter if I was working with the UN or if I was working with a small feminist group in Morocco. The data challenges were pretty much the same. And the reality was the really rich, interesting insights and stories of change were sitting in these text documents, and these grantee reports, and these stories, and these interviews and focus groups, and they never really got analyzed. And one of the reasons they didn't get analyzed was because the software tools in the market were really focused on quantitative data. And today, if you look at most of the tools, it's very segmented, even like it was back then, where, if I wanted to analyze those stories I'd collected, I would use in vivo or LSTI. If I wanted to do some data analysis and data collection, I would use a survey tool like a SurveyMonkey. If I wanted to analyze the quantitative and financial data of funders I was working with, I'd use SPSS or Stata, and then I'd visualize in Tableau. And so after doing this work for 10 years, it became really apparent that while I'm a data geek, and I'm sure all you are data geeks as well, and you love to do all these different types of analysis, it's not really scalable. And the storytelling aspect and the qualitative data is so rich and important to being able to tell a full impact story in this sector that we absolutely needed a software tool to help us to get there. And so that is why I founded Impact Mapper and started to build this company and build a tech solution. And then we also have the consulting services as well. So today I'm going to tell you a bit more about this solution and the way that we weave and analyze data, give you some concrete use cases so you can see a little bit how it's used and the diverse ways that this software can be used. And kind of hopefully you'll have some new ideas as well as you leave today. So of course, we're in this context, as you all very well know, where we have a lot of data just sitting here. It's not being analyzed. It's going unused. And that means we might not be funding the right types of interventions. If the types of software tools that we have only really are taking quantitative data into account, and the types of strategies and potential solutions to solve these big social change, human rights challenges that we all face are really often best communicated in a mixed methodology with qualitative and quantitative and financial data together, then we're off track already, right? We're probably not funding the right way. So we're really sitting on these resources that can help us all learn what's working and what's not, and to figure out who we should be funding, how we should be funding, and what communities we want to be supporting as we move forward. And what is really important is we want to start to ensure that our practices and the way that we're engaging in this process isn't just driven from this top-down donor-driven perspective. But when we start to think about bringing stories and voice of communities into a monitoring, evaluation, learning process, things start to transform, right? We start to learn more. We start to understand how we need to optimize social change trajectories. And that's what we want for a MEL system that's strong and meaningful, is to ensure that it's empowered by voices of communities themselves. And so storytelling and storytelling methodology is an amazing resource to do that. There's lots of very cool techniques I'm sure many of you know, we've done a lot of kind of adapted participatory storytelling workshops, and I can talk more about that later, as well as, using most significant change stories or using outcome harvesting. It doesn't really matter how you collect the data, but it does matter how you analyze it, right? You want to be able to get that data into some sort of process and systematic analysis so that you can gain insights from it. And so that's where the text solution comes in really handy. And that's why I felt like it was really important to have this all-in-one tool. And so in the tool, you really can enter in a diverse set of data. So you can enter in that financial data related to a grant that might have been given or an impact investment. You can add in information in Word documents, and you also have a survey tool with built-in visualizations. And so it really is this all-in-one tool to really explore data in more depth. There's a really nice way that you can kind of visualize some of the ways that funding is falling on a map. So you can kind of check this out, and it's changing as you're like shifting the data sources and creating new projects for analysis. But the idea here is that after entering in that financial data, you now can start attaching all that qualitative data. And so we have people attaching, site visit reports, those most significant change stories, outcomes they've harvested, those interviews or focus group discussions that you've had. And then you can upload and analyze according to your own theory of change and start to quantify some of the trends in those stories. And then also save quotes that are really compelling and save the nuance of the story and the voice as well. We have 8 different types of charts in place, so you can actually communicate those trends overall across a portfolio effectively and efficiently. And then, as I mentioned, we have surveys, which are really amazing to be able to analyze the data. And one of the key differentiators of our survey tools, first, is it's multilingual, so we make it easier for you to work across surveys in different languages. But most importantly, there's all this rich open-ended text data in the surveys, right? So we allow you to also tag that data and to see the themes and do a thematic analysis across that text data that you have in there. We also allow you to save quotes and be able to come back to those over time. So this is a really, cool and comprehensive tool. Lots of different organizations use the tool, but what I'd like to share a couple of different use cases just to make this come to life in a bit more depth. So one of the things that we did a few years ago, and then we just released this report and the analysis last year, was we started a project where we wanted to really collect stories from women's rights movement building organizations around the world. We wanted to have this database of stories that share what happens when you actually fund from a decade-long perspective. And so we had all these amazing surveys. This went out in 6 different languages using Impact Mapper surveys, and then we coded all the responses. This report here shows you some of those findings, but what we did was we came up with 9 key areas of change, ranging from leadership and normative shifts and legal and policy shifts and all these different areas in which these organizations were contributing to these really compelling outcomes. And then we aligned those to the SDGs and had the organizations themselves align them to the SDGs to show what happens when you are working on gender equality work, because it actually touches many different SDGs. And it's something we don't talk about enough, right? Kind of how that undergirding nature of gender infuses all these different areas. But when you look at that report and you look at some of the other case studies we produce for organizations and clients, one of the things that comes out very clearly is it's about the aggregation. So we can tell a bigger story about these stories that have been collected, right, across a set of people or organizations or communities. And then it's also about the depth and the nuance and the story within, and really diving down to understand underneath those trends, what does that change actually look like? What does it take? And to add that human element as well. And then we're adding the reach data, the numbers. So we're putting together a nice kind of puzzle. And that's kind of the examples that we have on our website. This is an example from some work we've done with Malala Fund, and we've been sharing this at a couple of different conferences lately. We're going to be sharing this in Good Tech Fest, which is next week. If you want to come and join, let me know. I have a code that you can join and get a discount. And so this is what it looks like to code an impact mapper. You enter in your outcome framework, your unique indicators into the tool. And as you're going through a report, you're going to highlight those pieces of the text that are relevant to that outcome. You're going to click on it and it's going to give it a frequency of 1, right? So all of a sudden you're able to say across this data set, X% of our grantees or our partners have contributed to strengthen girls' empowerment, right? So you start building this body of knowledge. We have this amazing analysis and filter tool, so you can actually look at those high-level trends after you've charted them, and you see that immediate data that was original data that was highlighted. So you have this nuance that you can actually go into. It becomes this search and find feature for the organization, which adds a lot more depth. And this is an example of the output of Malala Fund in one of their programs and portfolios they funded, where they're able to talk about those numbers and total funding and total grantee reach and reach across regions. They also collected, the total amount of people that were reached. But then moving deeper, this is the qualitative analysis of grantee reports, and none of this had been shared before, right? And so much of the changes that were hidden all of a sudden got surfaced up because they were able to start to highlight when these examples of change were occurring. And so these are all those outcomes that they cared about. So yes, okay, we have those, these are the most frequent outcomes that are occurring, but then we start digging deeper into actually what was done underneath each of these areas from the concrete examples given from those partners on the ground, and then diving deeper, creating a case study that really starts to contextualize the issue overall in the country, contextualize the work of the organization and why it matters and how they're supporting, the addressing this issue in that context, and then what some of those results were. So we had this really nice way to move across these different levels and types of data to tell a much more diverse and a deep story about change process in these different contexts. Another example of this work, and one of our clients is Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation, and they're another funder. They're using the tool to really shift internally from a hierarchical reporting process to a more collaborative and relational and conversational reporting process with their grantees. So instead of saying, hey, here's our report, write something up for us, they're having interviews with grantees on an annual basis. And one of the cool things they did with us is, they have these rich interviews that they're actually recording and then transcribing in a software called Trint, which is one of these, AI transcription softwares. So they wanted to get those transcript data into Impact Mapper automatically. So they didn't have to go and, add one by one into our platform. And so we now have a link so that any Trint recorded software goes automatically into Impact Mapper so you can analyze it right away. So that's very nice and cool. So the next step for us is actually working on some AI and doing this from an equitable perspective, which we're also excited about. But in terms of now, one of the things that I recommend everyone do in this space, in this field, is just take a look at what text data you have. And it might be embedded in a survey in that open response field that you have, right? Make sure that if you have collected it, you are analyzing it, right? Because it's a really important part of the research process first. And it's also a way that we can respect the time and energy of the people that have taken part in a process, in a data collection process with us. So it is really important that we analyze that data. You can do that in a lot of different ways, right? And we do whole trainings on how do you actually do coding of qualitative data. So you can use an existing framework that you might have, like your theory of change or some sort of log frame indicators. You also might just do, and that when you use some sort of structure that you already have in place, like a theory of change or a strategic plan, we call that deductive analysis, qualitative analysis. You are really using that lens and looking for examples of that. The other way you can code data, which is pretty cool, is to look at a piece of text and actually create themes and outcomes if it's an monitoring, evaluation, and learning process, and do an inductive coding process, meaning you're looking at that text data and you're creating themes from that. So it's almost like the people's voices are creating the indicators, right? And so it's this lovely bottom-up approach to qualitative data analysis and to also doing a monitoring, evaluation, and learning process, which is pretty nice. So you can really start to apply those tags and apply that taxonomy to stories. So then you'll be able to do different things with it, right? You can analyze the top trends. You can search on these trends in more depth. You can use them for different purposes. And then, of course, you can pull out those quotes and the nuance and the examples within them as you're writing the report and add such more, just a real depth to the analysis that you're doing and the research and the reports that you're producing. And then I always suggest too, starting to just study, research, look at different techniques for storytelling and communication and reporting back out and, what's effective. And, there's so many ways that we can really pair data that are going to be powerful as you're moving forward. I don't know if many of you know about this. We're really excited to be leading this. I do these training of trainers all over the world. We have one coming up this summer in Norway at a retreat center that Impact Mapper is a part of. And so if you are interested in storytelling, participatory storytelling techniques, data collection opportunities, and then actually how you create these storytelling workshops and code with participants, and then also engage in qualitative analysis and quantitative analysis and integral reporting, then this is an opportunity for sure. You can email me afterwards. Happy to just share anything else about that exciting event very soon. It's going to be wonderful. But I'm going to open up the floor now for questions, and really excited to hear your thoughts and learn what you're thinking about. Yeah, Jennifer.
Muted, sorry. Fantastic. I mean, I've been reading about Impact Mapper for some time, and so this is really wonderful. I'm wondering how you have coded in some sort of validation process.
Mm-hmm.
So often when we do impact stories, we look for a secondary or third source of data, and then we award it points depending on how valid that is. So for example, if you claim that as a result of the program you have impacted on a policy, then validation might be somebody else from a different ministry telling you about about impacting on policy. That might be one. And then if the draft policy is publicly available, that might be worth something. If that policy's been adopted and somebody senior says, oh, we attribute this back to the project, then it gets more points. And so then we've kind of scored outcomes. And I'm curious about how you do that. Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds very much like you're using an outcome harvesting approach in terms of that like triangulation of different outcomes. And we've done that with different clients, definitely, where we have, so for UNDP, I was the methodologist for this big evaluation where we collected 5 years of outcomes across different organizations. And we went to specific country offices to do more in-depth data collection in each of the regional offices. So we were able to gather multi-stakeholder information on the changes that were made across that time period. And one of the things we did there was just hold this like harvesting workshop where you're kind of pulling, up all the things and you got this like crazy long list, right? which I'm sure you're familiar with. And then afterwards, it was like, okay, and then who can actually validate that this actually happened, right? And who are the people in the community or stakeholders that are affected by this intervention or outcome, and who might we go back to? And what we've done, we haven't done the ranking, but I like that methodology. I think that's a very cool way to do that. We did a bit more of like a survey where we said, hey, this organization, this is the way they frame their outcome and their role. And so we're always really careful to make sure that that organization really concretely articulates, this is our role in the change process. This is how we made a difference, right? Because with this work, one organization really isn't going to do it all, right? They might have gathered stakeholders for a conversation related to the policy change and made some proposals, but then other people came in and took on other tasks. And, so it's a longer term process that occurs. So then that role was validated or not. So we set up a questionnaire if it was validated or not, or partially, and then offered the opportunity to reframe or add feedback and refinement. And so then you did that and you sent it to 3 different people. So you have this kind of multi-stakeholder perspective on the change and that organization's role in it, right? In this case, it was UNDP. So that was a process that we went through when we were doing it. But I think every organization probably has their own unique methodological processes or, hypotheses that they're testing out when you're engaged in that. And yeah, if anyone else has great ways of doing that, I think that would be wonderful to hear as well. Yeah.
So just as a follow-on, one of the issues that I'm continuously running into when I'm doing evaluations is the fact that head office and field offices have not been able to communicate the theory of change properly.
Yeah.
So if you ask on the ground what the theory of change is versus what was articulated to the donor or to the, whoever's sponsoring this, you get a very different story. And that communication gap often really can run into problems with this kind of data collection. And it's something that I spend a lot of time working with organizations to make sure that they've actually communicated what they're trying to do appropriately. And I could tell some stories about that if we run out of time.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. I mean, you're underscoring such an important point, right? And that's kind of a few things, right? Number one, this often disconnect between like a headquarter or some sort of body that has created a strategic process that may or may not have involved the regional or local country offices. And so there's just a lack of even awareness sometimes, right, of a theory of change and what it is and why it matters. Which is its own set of problems, right? If you're working in an organization towards a shared goal, if you don't have that shared understanding, that's incredibly problematic, because probably things happening on the ground are more dispersed than needed. And then I think the other part of that complication that exists is even if there is alignment and there was some connection to that broader process, the interpretation in a local setting and that context might require a different strategy, a different way of talking about the issues. We run into this issue a lot with gender equality work in general, what terms can be used and can't be used. And, in a certain context and many other thematic areas of work have the similar issues, right? And so there's that process of ensuring that alignment and harmonization and the ability for flexibility and adaptation based on a context and what makes the most sense so that the work can get done and the type of outcomes that you all share can actually happen. But it's incredibly, I'm sure, as you well know, very complex to manage in many ways. But I think that's where I love the stories and I love the voice, because if you use taxonomy, and you're just doing an analysis and you're saying, okay, this is the outcome, these are the outcomes that we're looking for from this perspective. And you're collecting stories and voice and examples and then analyzing it, you have this ability to kind of be flexible with the local adaptations and what's emerging, and then you can code those unexpected outcomes as well that are falling outside the theory of change. And so it's more of a process of how much time you have. Hopefully you have enough time to do that work, which we all are are challenged by. But I think that that's what I love about qualitative analysis, honestly, is that it doesn't have to be this crazy top-down issue, monitoring, evaluation, and learning, which is so it can be very problematic. Yeah.
Data parties. I love holding data parties. I'll stop talking, Linda, sorry. But I do love data parties. And so that's one way of doing this, is you get everybody to be coding together and to trying to make sense out of what's coming out. But anyway, I'll stop.
I love that. Yeah, I love it. Thanks.
That's fine. Thanks, Jennifer, for kicking us off with the Q&A session. So just a few questions in the chat for you, Alexandra. So the first one is, so the person wants to know, is Impact Mapper a digital platform?
Yeah, it is. It's online. So the cool thing about that is you're always getting the new feature updates, and we are constantly building. So that's really nice, right? We have new features being launched all the time, and we listen to our users. So the way that we build our features is based on our users' needs and requests. So it's also really nice because you get to kind of take part in this process, and also at times, talk to developers and tell them what you'd love to see. It's really nice.
Yeah. Okay. So the same person wants to know what the demand is for Impact Mapper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what just users, or I think, when we are building the brand and we're getting the word out there that this platform exists. And I think when people do any sort of analysis across different data sets, you have qualitative data, you have financial data, you have survey data, they get really excited because there's not other tools on the market that really allow for this set of mixed method analysis out there. Especially really focused heavily on the qualitative data. And I think probably you'll see that when you look out there as well. It's really tailored for the philanthropic and nonprofit ecosystem. So you can bring that financial data into, and you can analyze projects over time. So you're not losing out on any sort of over time analysis, that you see with a lot of other platforms out there.
Sure. Okay. Thanks. So we have two more questions. So the first one is, does Impact Mapper have a function for data cleaning or consolidation of data? That's qualitative or quantitative data? Or does this need to be done before using the software? So does data cleaning need to be done before the software? That's Impact Mapper.
Yeah, so we have some light data cleaning that we do to information that you enter related to grant data. So we have a CSV importer. So if you have data in Excel related to funding or projects that you're implementing, and you upload it, it's going to see things like you have different levels of capitalization for an organization name, or you have fields that say like 14th, it's a funding field and it says 14,000, and then in one it's like 14,000 USD. Right. So there's text in there. It's going to recognize that, hey, this looks wrong, and then we'll, let you validate it and clean it. So there's some rules in place for the most common data cleaning issues that we see. We don't clean everything, right? So you do have to ensure clean data. We do trainings on this. We have very detailed how-tos on the things to look for, because it is one of the most important and overlooked parts of the data analysis process, especially when you're working with quantitative information. And what we find is that a lot of organizations are using platforms like a CRM or like a Salesforce or a grants management database, And the data is super messy when it comes out of it. And I think no one really thinks about it.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, just put it in the system and it's going to be perfect, right? But when you actually want to analyze it and do the charting, it's a mess and you can't see anything, right? Of use because you have a million different errors.
Yeah.
So we really love to, talk about this with the groups that we work with and support them in that journey. And once you start kind of having the eye for it, it becomes like second nature, and you realize, okay, well, we really need to make sure this is systematized over time. If you were to use Impact Mapper in the platform itself, there's some things there when you add information one-on-one related to a grant, for example, where you'll see the fields come up over and over. So you're not having to write like free text fields. And that's what happens often, is that where you get off track is when you have like a million different people entering in different iterations of capacity building, right? Yeah, so that's definitely something that we built in. And yeah, the other thing that I was going to say about this is connected to the way that you analyze data. And one of the really unique features of our platform is that if you have your taxonomy or your outcome framework in the system, you actually can analyze across different data sources. So let's say you have a CSV upload, or you just create a survey and you also have Word documents. As long as you use that same type taxonomy, maybe it's like change laws and policies, and then you're listing the types of policies, for example, gender equity, climate policy, you have these issues. As long as that's the same, you can analyze across all those different data sources. So it opens up amazing possibilities for analysis across time, across different types of processes that we all know, you don't always collect data in the same way. And, last year it might have not been digital, and now it's digital, right? And so like, how do we actually start to, just harmonize these different ways to get data into the system? So that's a really cool thing that you can do in our platform.
Great. Okay, next question. Does the Impact Mapper also allow us to visualize our findings?
Yeah, so we have a chart generator in the tool. So we have probably 9 different types of charts. So we have the bar charts, all the ways. We have a bar and line chart together. We have line charts, area, heat map, bubbles.
Okay.
And there's one more. It will come to me.
So
it will come. So it's really nice. So you can actually align all of these with your different brand colors. You can download them in PDF, PNG, and JPEG. You also have the ability to, in the survey tool, all the data as they're rolled in are instantly visualized. You can filter by survey response, let's say. You say, I want to only see people that answered to, this region, and then see their data, and then the data will be visualized only according to that information. So it's very flexible in that sense. And you can go in and also upload external data you might have in CSV. Maybe there's a data set, some sort of national data set that has some really important things that you want to have a chart for. You can just create that little CSV, upload it into Impact Mapper, and then choose from all the different charts and do the analysis from there.
Great. Thanks to all who asked their questions. Are there any more questions? Any follow-ups for Alexandra?
I have one more.
Sure, go for it.
How do you document causality or be able to identify causality? And is that something that Impact Mapper can do?
No, and I would say, we are not in the business of causality. I would say that quite frankly. I think you would. I'm sorry, contribution.
Contribution, not attribution.
Exactly, always. And I'm a big proponent of that, especially because we work primarily in fields where it wouldn't be right to try to assign attribution. And it wouldn't be right to say that this, there's some sort of linear and logical necessary process to change, right? And that's really the type of clients we work with are in this social justice space, are in this process, like bigger structural, normative, institutional change type of work. And we really focus on identifying your role in the change process. And so that's where we really want people to get clear on that kind of aspect and to start measuring that and to check that, right? And you can do that through multi-stakeholder analysis. You can do that through interviews and focus groups. You can do that in a lot of different ways, or, just validating external, policies and who is involved in that, right? There's so many different ways you can go about that process. But I think if you're interested in some sort of, linear regression or any sort of, bigger kind of statistical analyses, I would say go to Stata, go to R, go to the other platforms, the statistical analysis platforms that exist for this very purpose. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel there, because there's a lot of awesome software that does that, that you can go to. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just sometimes you want to be able to pick up things. I'm working with an organization that is doing contraceptives for young women, and they have discovered through endless filtering through the data that if 3 close friends are using contraceptives, then you can get the girl that you're targeting to use it as well. If she doesn't know anybody else, and there's a taboo on discussing contraceptives so that they don't know that each of them are talking about it, there's this issue. So you have to then take that knowledge, create the environment in which the girls can talk about contraceptives, and then, so it's interesting, but they're really filtering through the data, and it was quite a painful process. And if we'd had some way of identifying causality, it might have been less painful, but maybe not.
Maybe not. Yeah, maybe not. I mean, it's fascinating, right? Because it's about social norm change, and it's about what's the tipping point? It's almost like a tipping point conversation, right? Like how many different inputs does one need to have before it makes a difference? And so it's a really fascinating methodology, and on average, if it's 3 people, that's a great finding. That's awesome. Yeah.
It's really interesting, but we all know we should be exercising every day, and how many of us actually do it? That's the whole thing, right? Sorry, Linda. Once again.
It's fine. Thank you, Jennifer. So Alexandra, I have a question around verification. So assuming you're working with a development partner, and depending on the way the budget is allocated, probably they might not have budget for site visits, but they do well on reporting on their activities, their indicators, outcomes, outputs. They're doing a great job. But then in terms of verification, like in a situation like that, what would be the advice, or how would you recommend they go about verifying data if there isn't budget for site visits? Like, what are the alternatives around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where the outcome harvesting philosophy can be really interesting, or any sort of analysis of who in this space or this sphere has access to information that could be validating, right? And to set up a set of interviews or a set of surveys as some sort of process that allows for a little bit of triangulation of the data. And I think this is where it really matters to define what really matters to triangulate, right? Because a lot of data and a lot of funding is quite small in different contexts. And the extra cost of going and doing this super minute analysis, it just isn't worth it. And it's a waste of money. Just get more money to the field, in my opinion, right? Pilot and try to get it to the people that are doing the good work. But then there might be some aspects that you really feel like, actually, this is necessary to do a deeper dive on. Maybe it's because you want to know is there a way we could fast forward this, or are there other partners this group might not know that they could be connected to, that could totally transform the trajectory of this intervention, or whatever, like really make a bigger difference, right? And so I would say really to focus on what really, really matters to do that validation of. But yeah, I mean, I am a big believer in trust-based funding and philanthropy, and, and a funder doing due diligence, and so I would hope that when you are going into a process and funding these organizations, that you would do a deep analysis of this organization from a variety of different perspectives. And part of that would be like fact-checking some of this, the validity and rigor of the programs that are being implemented and so on. And the process. And then at that point, you can decide, how much you're actually giving, and is it really, is the analysis process aligned with the amount of funding as well.
But there are some low cost ways of doing that too, Linda.
Okay.
You can get people to tag their location, how much time they have to do, and trust. I am a big proponent of trust-based philanthropy too, and I've worked with various foundations, but the problem is that not everybody on the ground is that way. Sometimes people want to not go to the school, and because it's a hassle to get there, and so they want to go there, and they'll just tell you that they did the workshop at the school. So you want to have some systems that are going to be checks and balances, so that people know that they're accountable. And so it could be that you send a text message when you arrive at the school, and the principal sends a picture of you and him at the same time. There's strategies like this, or you look for secondary sources of data. We've used the guys who deliver Coca-Cola to villages to, for example, do photos of the water pump, and to do a quick pH thing, and do a little one comment about how clean the pump is. And for that, they get airtime. So that checks the water NGO that's been doing work in those villages. So you can come up with strategies that keep everybody kind of on because everybody wants to do the easy thing, right? And not everybody is motivated by change, sadly. Only about 10% of us are. Fortunately, we're all on this call.
I believe so. Thank you, Jennifer, for adding your voice to Alexandra's. I think we still have one question. So the question goes, could you elaborate on uses of the impact mapper?
Really diverse use cases. I've shared funding, like funder and grant making use cases. We have many using it for evaluation processes. So evaluators or evaluation firms using the tool. We do a lot of like meta syntheses for UN agencies. So those evaluations of evaluations to see what are some of those higher level outcomes that are emerging in alignment with. So we've done one for UNFPA on their strategic plan and looking across that period to see what sort of lessons learned have been achieved over a 5-year period. We've done, we're just about to launch sometime, hopefully in the next month or so, big compendium that we've done for Spotlight Initiative, which is a global initiative, UN initiative to end gender-based violence around the world. And we've coded all of the country and regional office reports over the 5 years that it's been implemented for lessons learned on all these different thematic issues. So it becomes really powerful when you actually look at existing evaluations and research data as data sources. We have people using our survey tool for, training purposes after a training program, pre and post, to see if there's changes or just for feedback. We recommend every user use the tool as a story and quote repository. So you can just enter in all these amazing stories of change and impact, tag them according to theme, region, issue, and then the whole team has access to it. So it becomes amazing for communications and writing blogs, and just so everyone has the examples at their fingertips. Because often what happens in institutions, the people that have been to these sites have these amazing, rich stories, right? But then everyone else in the organization doesn't know anything about that, partner or that organization. So it's a way to also just democratize access to all these impact stories and ensure that you can share that, check it out at any time and use it as you wish. Yeah, and I mean, really, we have academic institutions and researchers using the tool as well. So this corporates and impact investors using the tool to track their impact investments. So super flexible. It's all these analyses, and you can just kind of package them in different ways depending on your needs. But it's really, yeah, it's a really nice if you need a mixed methodology tool for your work that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alexandra. Okay, I think one last question from me. So if someone here on the platform is interested, like what's the process for signing up? How can people onboard or get the organizations to start using Impact Mapper?
Great. Yeah. So just reach out. You can set up a meeting and we can, understand your needs and then get you set up on the platform. So you can email me personally at alex@impactmapper.com, or the team. I'm just going to put it in the chat here. Or the team. And then you also, on the website, there's a little meeting scheduler, so you can just schedule a time to chat. And I see there's another question about customizable. It is, yeah, everything's customizable. So it's, it's your taxonomy, it's your outcome framework that you're using and so on. So it's aligned with whatever you're tracking.
Great. Okay, it looks like we are almost at the end of our session for today. But any last parting words from you, Alexandra, as we close down the curtain for today's meetup?
No, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been a real pleasure to be here, and thank you all for being with me today and listening to Impact Mapper. And yeah, just do reach out, keep in touch, and wishing you all the best with your work. So thank you.
Great. Thank you to participants. Let's show our appreciation to Alexandra for sharing her wealth of knowledge on how to tell impact stories using Impact Mapper. All right. Okay, so before we hop off, I'd like to just share a few things in the chat window. So I've shared the link to a feedback form. It would be great to have you all provide feedback on how today's session went, and then also make recommendations on what we can discuss during our meetups. And also, if you want to volunteer yourself, you want to showcase, or you want to educate us or inform us about any new developments in the research, monitoring, evaluation, and learning space, we'll be delighted to have you. And definitely, Alexandra, this will not be your last time joining us or us calling on you to present. Yeah, so we'll definitely be in touch for future future meetups. I'm also going to share the link to our LinkedIn page. So if you want to know more about our activities in the year, do well to follow our LinkedIn page. I've also shared the link to our X page as well. And then lastly, I'll share the link to our YouTube channel where you can get the recording. So the recording from today will be uploaded there as well. And yeah, you'll be notified on the social media channels as well. Yeah, so if you've missed previous sessions, you can always go back to YouTube to see what we've done in the past. Yeah, there's a lot of information, a lot of resources that you can tap into from our experts who have been part of our meetups. All right, so huge thanks to everyone. I'd like to acknowledge you all by name: Shioma, Christine, Cynthia, Delphine, Izue, Jennifer, Joy, Kennedy, Kobasia, Lishibo, Magben, Maketa, Mary, Mavis, Mubarakatu, Obiajeli, Peter, Priscilla, Ruben, Seiram, Shamsuddin, and Zokanathan, and all who were part and jumped off or had to leave at some point. Yeah, we are very grateful that you could all be part and hope to see you next month as well. So this is bye from the Women in RMEL team. Thank you all for joining, and I wish you a successful end to your week. Bye.